Welcome to another episode of Michigan Tech's Husky Hour. In this episode of Husky Hour, Joe Cooper and a panel of guests talk about finances, including how to keep track of them, how to manage your expenses, and what decisions you can be making now to better your financial situation in the future. Enjoy!
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Husky Hour. We're here to talk about some life skills, especially relating to finance.
All right, I'm Beth. I'm an intern for the Center for Student Mental Health and Wellbeing. And so we put this Husky Hour together to, like Dana said, to focus more on the financial aspect of adulting because there's so many different aspects.
Hi, I'm Michael Maurer. I've been at Tech for way too long. I did my undergrad degree starting in 2008, finished my bachelor's in electrical engineering, then came back recently for a master's and PhD. So I have both the undergraduate and graduate perspective. I'm currently working on a PhD in photonics, which is the study of light. So I get to spend my day playing with lasers.
So my name is Joe Cooper. I'm the Director of Financial Aid. I've been at Michigan Tech now for somewhere around almost 11 to 12 years. And the last 5 years I've been in financial aid. I also worked in the housing department and also what's now the Student Leadership and Involvement Office.
All right, so we're going to start. Joe has a presentation that he is going to share with us.
So financial literacy is our topic, and I know it's kind of can be a scary / boring / overwhelming topic depending on how you look at it. My goal is to hopefully not make it that way. I really like the words that our hosts used before they talk about, adulting, life skills. A lot of these are things I wish I would have known and or practiced a little bit better when I was in your shoes. And I see Dana shaking her head. I'm guessing she can relate, and especially those of us with education / counseling backgrounds. A little bit different for us in some cases, and we see what you all do at Michigan Tech with the fields you go in, and hopefully we want you to be in a really good position when you graduate here. And so personal finance, very briefly talk about student loans and financial aid, and then ultimately investing and planning ahead. That's the part that I think is super exciting because you really have a potential to situate yourself in a great spot in the future. So I'm not going to get too caught in the weeds with this, but right now recognizing that we could have someone on the call who could be a first-year student who just started college. We could have someone on who is a grad student, but I just want you to think about right now, what do you have in your possession? Do you have a checking account? Do you have a savings account? Do you have a credit card or multiple credit cards? And a little bit more rare probably, but do any of you have a retirement account? And again, don't think that, oh my gosh, I don't have a retirement account. Don't think that you're behind by any means, but it is every now and then I encounter a student who says, yes, I have one. My parents started it for me. So I want you to think about those. And then I want you to think about, how do you keep track of the accounts that you have? Do you monitor these regularly? Do you have some sort of system that you use? For lack of better words, that can also be called budgeting, okay? And budgeting can be a pretty scary word. It can also cause tension and arguments in a household or a relationship. I certainly have had that experience as well because my partner Angela and I kind of saw budgeting a little bit differently. I was under the habit, and this is not a great habit, but again, part of it depends on your upbringing, your family, right? I came from a family where both my parents regularly worked 2 jobs when we were growing up. And for us, budgeting was at the end of the 2-week cycle before they got paid again. If the account was still in the positive, that was good. That was a success. That was budgeting. They didn't use any formal system to track it and say, this much money goes towards this goes towards this. And that's normal. That's probably the majority of families in America, right? You're just trying to make ends meet and everything. But there can be a better way to do this. And my wife has been pretty hardcore on that, making sure, hey, we can do this more clean and organized. And you know what? I won't tell her this, but she was right. So it doesn't have to be scary. That word budgeting can be scary, especially when you're set in a certain way. It's all about basically awareness. That's the key word. Think of budgeting instead as being aware of how your money is spent, how it's stored, how it's used. And some of that may just mean thinking about and being aware about certain things that you spend it on. It's really easy these days to spend money. So not to date ourselves, but Dana, I hope it's okay I throw you in this bucket too. You're probably, much younger than I am and everything like that. But I think back to when I was in high school. I had a bank account and I had an ATM card, but it did not have the Visa or MasterCard logo on it. Dana, when you first had an account, did yours not have it, or did you have the logo always? Yeah.
card. My first bank card was just a laminated piece of paper with my account
Right.
number on it.
Right. And the point I'm saying this is it is so easy these days to spend money because chances are if you have a checking account, you have a little card that says your bank's name on it, but it has a Visa or MasterCard logo on it, and you can use it anywhere. And I mean anywhere. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, if I wanted to go play laser tag with my friends in Metro Detroit, I had to drive to the ATM at my bank first to pull out cash if I needed that because I could not use my card at those establishments. They only accepted credit cards at that time, not the same as a debit card because debit cards didn't really exist then. Point is, it was a lot less tempting to go get that $6 coffee, to randomly stop at Taco Bell on my drive home after work, things like that. So these days, y'all are put in far more tempting situations, okay? So that's my little tangent for that. Credit can be overwhelming too. There's a credit score and there's a credit history. If you don't have a credit card at all right now, but if you have used a student loan, you now have a credit history started. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing in most cases that you've started that. If you're someone who has never had a credit card, has never taken out a student loan, you may want to think about that at least before the end of college, just maybe opening up one credit card just to start what's called your credit history. Credit score is just that. That's what's in the top right here, where you're basically assessed based on your credit score. If you have good credit, bad credit, whatever. Your credit history is basically just that. It looks back as far back as your credit history goes and says, okay, Joe had student loans that were opened in 2002, but he paid those off successfully. He made his regular monthly payments. And that's where if you're ever late on a payment, you miss a payment, you stop paying, that's where those dings come in, right? And so if you later on, as I'll talk about in a bit, go to get a car loan, go to buy a house, they're going to run your credit history, and that may scare them when they see those dings. You'll probably still get your loan and be able to buy your car or your house, but you may get penalized with a worse interest rate or some worse terms. And so that's something to think about. Some other tips there for good credit, basic things you would expect. Don't let your balance get too high, pay it each month. So I talked about the impacts about if you have good credit versus bad credit. And this can be very significant, right? You miss one payment, it is a big deal because that could stay on your credit report for years, okay? And that could ding you later on. And what I mean by that is, let's say you go to buy a house. Let's say you do it around here and you're going to get a mortgage, your home loan for $100,000. And again, this is kind of an estimate, but it's fairly an accurate representation. 30-year mortgage. These days, you can get a 3% interest rate, which is typically considered pretty good, or even up to 5%, which is also considered pretty good, but that can really vary. There's a whole spectrum. They base your interest rate not only on the economy right now, but also on your credit, because they're trying to figure out what kind of person you are. If you're a liability with your credit, how likely you are to pay that back regularly. So even if your score or your credit gets you a lower interest rate by 1 or 2%, that could be a difference of $40,000 or even $50,000 or more over the course of 30 years. That's 1 or 2 brand new cars you could have bought during that time. So it's just a matter of, do you want to maximize where your money's going for that mortgage? And same thing could be said with a car, okay? Your loan rate for that too. If you have better credit, you get better deals and you get rewarded. So just keep that in mind. Student loans, not going to spend too much time on this, but most students at Michigan Tech do utilize student loans. It's just how it is. I just want you to know, be aware how much you have in loans. What I hate is when I experience a student that when they graduate and they come into our office and say, yeah, I don't know, I think I've got loans out. How much do I have? And I'm like, you should know the answer to that. Otherwise, that's concerning. So you can monitor your loans through the portals they give you. Be aware of the interest rates. Be aware of when you have to start paying them back. Loans do not have to be scary. Thankfully, at Michigan Tech, the majority of students are overwhelmingly successful at paying their loans back and paying them off. In fact, the most recent report that came out last week, only 2.3% of our students were not successfully paying their loans back. We have usually the second or third best loan default rate in the state of Michigan, with Michigan Ann Arbor being the only one better than us. So great return on investment there. Estimating student loan payments. Anybody want to take a stab at what the average student loan debt for a Michigan Tech grad is? Ben took a guess of 30,000, okay? And Ben, you're pretty darn close. It's actually around 37 or 38,000. And I know that's not a number to underestimate by any means, but that's not bad, right? You hear horror stories in the news all the time about people with 6 figures in student loan debt. So 37,000, then when you look at that number before, that only about 2% are defaulting, meaning about 98% are successfully paying those back. It's pretty darn good. And so I want you to think about, though, when you take out loans, this is just a rough estimate, but for every 10,000 in loans you take, if you were prepared to pay $100 a month after graduation, what would that look like? All right, you take out 35,000, around that average, $350 a month. Not too bad, right? It's about a car payment, something like that. Totally doable with the average salary y'all are going to be making your great jobs. 50,000 in loans, 500 a month. Still not too bad, doable. Now when you get to 75,000 or 100,000, which thankfully is a lot more rare here at Michigan Tech, that's like a mortgage, okay? And that's where it gets kind of scary. It's not totally insurmountable, but we just want you to be aware of that as you take out loans and make sure you're only taking out what you actually need. Otherwise, yeah, that refund from the loan sounds great, but you're going to have to pay that back with interest later. Real quick, if you're receiving federal student loans, you do have to meet what's called satisfactory academic progress, which basically is a thing the federal government requires. And so whether it's federal loans, federal Pell Grant, you have to maintain a 2.0 cumulative, you have to maintain a 67% completion rate, which basically means if you take 15 credits, you have to successfully pass and complete 10 out of those 15. And then max time frame, this is especially relevant when you're in your later years at Tech. They just don't want you staying in school forever if you don't have to, right? If you're close to graduation, basically, if most degrees here take 128 credits or so to graduate, once you reach 192 credits, they're going to cut you off and say, hey, it's time to graduate and move on. So here's the fun part, success in investing. This is the more exciting part to think about, right? Because the stats are incredible for Michigan Tech grads. This is not something I had to boast about when I graduated from that school 2 hours down the road with the colors of green and gold. We won't go into that too much. But then again, I was an education major and I love the field of education. I love the helping professions, but it's just the fact that their starting salaries are not the same as this. So we get to boast about a lot of cool stuff here with the type of majors we have. So top 20 early career pay in the nation, average starting salary tends to be around $65K, which is pretty darn good. Dana, I don't know about you, my first job was nowhere close to that. And so don't take that for granted. Co-ops and internships over $20 an hour. So question is, what are you going to do with that? You know, that first starting salary or that hourly wage you make from a co-op, $20 an hour. It's way better than any of my summer jobs ever were. I'll tell you that much. I worked in a fudge shop in Mackinac City and made $7 an hour. And that was considered a good wage at that time because that was more than $2 above minimum wage or so at the time. So what do you do with that? Retirement calculators. They're fun to play with online, and I know you're thinking, why in the world do I want to start thinking about retirement? I'm a college student right now. I'm paying my tuition. That's ridiculous. Unfortunately, it's never too early to start thinking about that. Anybody want to take a guess? What percentage of your income, when you're in your real job, your career, what percentage of your income do you think you should save towards retirement? So we've got two guesses so far, 5% and 30%. So to be clear, a 20% guess, there's no right or wrong answer to this. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the experts, and I am not, you know, like a financial advisor you find at an investment company. I'm not that person, but everybody will tell you something a little different. In general, most of the experts are going to say at least save 10% of your salary if you can put towards retirement. Most of them will say, you know what, you're going to be doing pretty good if you can put 15% of your retirement away. And then others are going to say, if you put 20% or more away, you're going to be sitting really good. And by really good, it's all, you know, depending on how you look at it. It's not saying you're going to be rich or loaded or anything like that. It depends on the salary you have. Really varies. So to put it in perspective, at Michigan Tech, and most of your employers will likely offer some sort of matching or contribution program where they put something towards your retirement. So at Michigan Tech, Dana and I, as full-time employees here, have an option for Michigan Tech where if we put in up to 7.5% of our salary towards retirement, Michigan Tech will match that with up to another 7.5%. So that means that automatically we'd be putting in 15% of our salary towards retirement. So that's a pretty good deal. But one of the things, like most places, Michigan Tech, they will match what I put in up to 7.5%. If I say I can only put in 5% of my salary, they only put in 5%. That's common with employers. And if you can, do the full amount that they allow you to. Otherwise, you're leaving a free benefit on the table that your company is offering you. I had a friend that worked at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and their system actually, Dana is going to be like, what? Because that's what I said when I heard it. 15 and 15. If their employees put in 15% of their salary, UNLV puts in another 15%. That is huge benefit. So yeah, it varies wherever you go, but
I
make
think
sure you
I'm
don't
gonna
leave
be
money.
moving to Las Vegas. I've got to sign off.
That's what I said too. And
It's
that's
like-
another thing to think
It's
about.
like
is
tens of thousands of dollars
right, how fast your
extra
retirement would
on your
compound.
salary.
Right. But Dana makes a great point, is that's something to consider when you're looking at those job offers. Don't just look at the salary, which hopefully will be pretty good. Look at the benefits. Do they have a great health benefit package for you? Which if you have conditions yourself, I have underlying conditions like asthma and allergies, or if you have a family or intend to start a family, I mean, those are things you need to think about. And same thing with retirement. What is the retirement package on that? That UNLV one is great. That would make me think, even if the salary is not quite as high, that benefit would counter that for sure. So, all right, what are you going to do with that? You go from being a college student where you've been paying tuition, haven't had a lot of disposable income, to suddenly you've got a decent salary, you're making student loan payments, but you're still doing okay. One of the things I want you to start to think about is, how are you going to start investing in your future? Okay, you hear a lot about Social Security, and I'm not an expert on that either, but you hear about it and most people say, well, most people in the government or the experts, they question, is Social Security going to be around by the time when you retire? I don't know. I'm not trying to get political with that, but as someone, me, who's, almost maybe halfway through my career, not even close really with the way things are going, you got to work longer than that. I don't want to risk that, right? When I retire, to suddenly say, oh, you don't have Social Security, you should have saved more. And so that's not something I want to take a gamble on. One of the things that a lot of financial advisors will say, especially to folks like you, and I use this term young people, right? Because most of you are college students and have your whole career ahead of you. So regardless of your age, have your career ahead of you. They'll tell you to look at a Roth IRA. This is just one option, but the great thing about this is how it's taxed. Compared to other retirement plans, the beauty about a Roth is that when you are paid from your job, right? Let's say I get paid this Friday for Michigan Tech. My pay is already taxed, right? Federal, state taxes, all that. So then I get the money what I'm supposed to get. If I choose to put a contribution in a Roth IRA after that, that goes in the savings. That's my contribution. And then there's interest earned on that as well over time. And so by the time I retire, when I'm 59 or 60, I can only hope it would be that early. When I go to pull that out with a Roth, there are no taxes on what I pull it out at that point in time. Compared to other retirement plans, things are taxed sometimes multiple times, and that's just not fun when you see, the government unfortunately taking a ton out. But that's just one option, but you definitely should start thinking about it. There are tools out there and calculators that show if you even invest in a retirement account like this, even just 10 years when you first start your career and then you stop completely, you still could earn more money in that time frame of 10 years than if you wait 20 years afterwards to start, because of how the interest accrues and how it compounds. So basically you have the unique ability shortly after you graduate, when you first started your job, to really set yourself up for a good position. And I say this very sincerely and genuinely because I don't want you all to make maybe some of the same mistakes I made as a college student, and maybe some of my irresponsible credit card usage, because I didn't think about all of these things and what I could have done right after graduation.
One question that did pop up during your presentation, Joe, is at what point after you graduate, do you start repaying your student loans?
That's a really good question. And in general, with nearly all loans, for sure all federal loans, after you graduate or leave school, you have what's called, excuse me, a 6-month grace period. And that's great because that means that after you graduate, you don't immediately have to start paying those off, right? Because sometimes your job might start for another few months. Or, as I've known a number of tech students over the years, they say, hey, got this good job offer. I'm going to spend 2 months backpacking in Europe before my job starts. I've known a few tech students that went on an adventure before that started. So most of them, it's a 6-month grace period. If you have a private or alternative loan through ones you hear about like Sallie Mae, Wells Fargo, Discover, you might want to double check with them to make sure it's the same, but nearly all of them, it's a 6-month grace period. And that clock starts basically as soon as the semester ends. So if graduation is May 5th and the semester concluded the day before, Friday of finals, that's when that 6-month clock starts on that.
Yeah, I've got a couple things I'd like to add to what Joe said. First of all, when I went through undergrad here, it was about my sophomore year that I started paying attention to my finances. And I was able to get a handle on it by doing two things. One, like Joe said, instead of just using my credit card everywhere, I just said, all right, I'm going to take out, let's say, $100 a week. That's what I have to spend on food and gas. And I would watch that money disappear, and that kind of helped me correct my spending habits. So I found that very useful, having that physical cash and seeing that move around, seeing myself spending the money. Also, as I started looking at various bills, I realized some things like paying monthly for auto insurance is more expensive than doing their quarterly or annual options. So if you have the money to pay once a year or every 6 months, whatever your insurance provider offers, you can save hundreds of dollars a year just by switching payment plans without changing what you're actually receiving. And that goes for a lot of things, including like life insurance. If you don't have health insurance through tech, there are a lot of things where if you can pay for a full year instead of monthly, the cost goes way down. And really look at that stuff, look at what you're spending money on. And then bank accounts, they have a lot of time minimums. I started with 2 bank accounts, and I know Joe recommended doing that, but I didn't realize I didn't have enough money to have both bank accounts for free. I needed like $2,000 in each of them for them not to have a $10 monthly charge. That seems like a small charge, but that adds up. So those 2 bank accounts, $10 every month, losing almost $250 a year. Putting them together, then I had enough money for a single free bank account, and that was saving me money. So really look at what you're being charged for when you receive the bills. I know it's really easy to just swipe your card, not think about it until you have to pay off your credit card.
What's a general good amount to have in your savings for like an emergency fund? So like if my car breaks down and I, can kind of dip into that. And it's, like I said, it's going to be completely different for college students compared to someone married with children. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
So I guess I was taught by my parents to make sure I have about 3 months of worth of expenses in my saving account. So if something happens, either there's a little bit of a buffer so that I can pull that money out, or let's say I lose a job or I'm not getting paid anymore, I have a little time to take care of that. So I was always told about 3 months salary, and that's what I make sure I have in my savings account.
I've definitely heard that rule of thumb as well. I'm at a place where we've put more of our investments into like mutual funds or money market things, or even every once in a while my husband will pretend he's a day trader, but he really doesn't trade daily. It's like, oh, okay, I'll wait on this one until it goes back up. But those things mean that I have less just in my actual savings account than I used to have for like the 3 months, because I know I can pull stuff out of a money market if like the kids, if there's an emergency or something, and it only takes a day or two to come out. But it is important to keep an eye on that and think like, I don't want to be taking a bunch of money out of investments at a loss. So for us, it would be a lot of money to have in a savings account for a family of 5. And I like to be making money on that money that's sitting there. So it's different, but certainly in my 20s, it was kind of that, like, can we cover mortgage and house payment through, and groceries for the next couple of months. And then another piece is that I always worked 9 months of the year. So I always had to pre-save for the summer, which kind of goes back to your thing. A lot of people, if you have a job like that that's seasonal, sometimes you can opt to have your paychecks spread out over the course of a year, or you can get paid all up front. One thing that I did was I was always paid up front, which allowed me to invest that money and hopefully make money on it sooner. But when I was younger, I definitely would have needed to take the spread out option because I wasn't as good at managing my money. And so that can be just a nice option. I think it can be good both ways, and you just have to look at your situation.
I was just going to say, I agree with what both Dana and Michael said. I think to strive for 3 months savings is ideal, but don't feel pressured that, you need to be at that point now, because you are, and again, not trying to diminish this, but you are just a college student, right? Recognizing that in terms of social mobility, the way Michigan Tech is, 25% of our students technically come in are classified as low income in terms of federal government receiving Pell Grant, things like that. A lot of this transformation doesn't or can't happen until after you graduate. And so keep in mind circumstances for what that is, but it's a great thing to strive for. But just know if you're not there anywhere close to there yet, that's totally okay. And that's where, like Michael said, make smart decisions in the meantime. Make sure you're not wasting money on other things by, paying things monthly, or bank account fees, or that darn pesky Sirius XM radio when you have to renegotiate their rates. If anybody has that in their car, it's annoying, but if you don't renegotiate it, you'll pay way more money.
You just touched on it, and Michael talked about it as well, but are there any kind of like tips or tricks any of you guys have for saving money? Like recently you mentioned coffee, and I have perfected the coffee I would always get at Big B at home now, and it's significantly less money. So that's my tip and trick that I've recently learned. But are there any other ones that you guys have to save money on, like the little things like that, besides like, check all of these fees from the banks and your payments and all of that stuff?
I think it helps to like diversify where you shop. So for me, even like I go to Econo Foods when it's weird now because of COVID. When I have to go inside, I go to Econo Foods because people tend to wear masks. But going to Walmart for pickup orders is like a good saver on bulk stuff. But also like the co-op has really good deals sometimes. And so sometimes I'll just stock up on things like, oh, my favorite pasta sauce is on sale. I'm going to grab 4 jars of it instead of 1. So those are kind of obvious things.
This is maybe silly, but some people don't like it, but I do. If you can make big meals and eat leftovers. And some people hate it, right? But I love leftovers, and it's common, even though it's just my wife and I, that we will make a big meal, and maybe even 3 nights in a row we'll make a normal sized meal, and then the following 2 nights we'll just live off leftovers, or the following all meals. And so if you can do that, it's amazing when for 2-3 days in a row you don't have to spend any other money on food, whether it be groceries or going out, and you're not even preparing anything special. That really can make a difference.
Yeah, I'd like to build on what Joe just said. When I moved in undergrad from the dorms to off-campus housing, like the first month, I did not realize how expensive food was because I always had the dorm meal plan. But what my house ended up doing is we did big meals instead, and everyone in the house cooked 1 or 2 days a week, and they cooked for everyone in the house. So we were able to do the big meals without having the leftover issue where you're eating the same thing for multiple days. So yeah, there's definitely doing those bigger meals is a lot cheaper, especially than going out, and it's also cheaper than like making a single meal for just yourself or you and one other person. Yeah, the other thing in general is if you're just looking to save money, think about what you and friends do in your free time. You can obviously go to the DT or to a bar and spend lots of money drinking and hanging out with your friends, or you can choose to go do something outside. That stuff is either really cheap or free. So think about what activities you're engaging with for your own enjoyment and consider the cost of them. There might be another option everyone is happy with that can be free or much cheaper than what you're already doing.
Truth to that, and a lot of people times are and still are tough during COVID, but my wife and I actually saved money during the peak of COVID because we were not going out to as many places, whether that be eating out, whether that be doing stuff. We went hiking more, right? Because you could be socially distant and hiking. So very truthful to that. Take advantage of those opportunities.
Husky Hour is brought to you by the Center for Student Mental Health and Well-Being. Visit mtu.edu/well-being for more information about programs, events, and workshops. Thanks for listening.